enfin, qui ont fini leur speech pas plus de semaine. Je pense que c'est un bon temps. Les gens ils vont faire une opportunité de les gens qui avec tout le monde.
Mais regarde, sache, moi, Rasoul, genre, c'est pas Rasoul, là, c'est au niveau des mouvements pour les véhicules, tout ça. Avoir du soutien là-dessus du mal à viser, fait que quand c'est exploité, ça comme complètement glisse par l'avance.
C'est beaucoup d'intérêt. Alors, c'était monté par les ouais. Je ferai pas ça. Je vais me mettre dehors pour la salle, pour les amis.
Good morning. We're going to start in a few minutes, but I wanted to let people know that the reserved seats are actually not reserved for this session, they're reserved for the next one. So please feel free to move forward in the room. It'll give us a warmer, cozier environment. So please come forward if you like. Your Excellencies, the Right Honorable Mary Simon and Mr. Whit Fraser, Ambassadors, Excellencies, distinguished guests, good morning. My name is Amy Baker and I am Canada's Ambassador to Norway. I would like to thank you very much for joining us for this side event at Arctic Frontiers, Rising Voices, Indigenous Women Leading Arctic Transformation. Bonjour, je suis Amy Baker et je suis l'ambassadrice canadienne en Norvège. Je vous remercie beaucoup de vous joindre à nous à cet événement parallèle de Arctic Frontiers. Today's conversation highlights the leadership, resilience, and vision of Indigenous women across the Arctic. Women who are shaping governance, stewarding the environment, strengthening communities, and carrying knowledge across generations in a time of profound change. It also reflects Canada's commitment to inclusive Arctic leadership, grounded in Indigenous knowledge, gender equality, and youth engagement. We are very grateful to our moderator, Taylor Jobin, and our distinguished panelists, Celia Karina Muotka, President of the Sami Parliament, Sarah Olsvig, President of the Inuit Circumpolar Council, and Canada's Arctic Ambassador, Virginia Mearns. What an incredible group of women we have here to share their wisdom with us today. And foremost among them, of course, is Her Excellency, the Right Honourable Mary Simon, Governor-General of Canada. Her Excellency is a trailblazer in so many ways. We all know that she is the first Indigenous Governor-General of Canada. Here are a few other firsts. She is also the first Inuk to hold the rank of ambassador. She was Canada's first ambassador for circumpolar affairs. She was a lead negotiator in the creation of the Arctic Council. She was the first and only female president of Makivik, the Inuit Land Claims Corporation, responsible for implementing the James Bay and Northern Quebec Agreement and protecting and promoting Inuit rights in Nunavik. She played a pioneering role in securing the first modern Indigenous land claims agreement in Canada, and she was among the first Inuit broadcasters in Canadian national media. Who better to open a session on the power and leadership of Indigenous women? Qui de mieux placé pour ouvrir une session sur le pouvoir et le leadership des femmes autochtones? C'est un grand honneur pour moi d'inviter Son Excellence, la très honorable Mary Simon, à prendre la parole. It is my great honor to welcome Her Excellency, the Right Honourable Mary Simon to take the floor.
Ulakut, good morning. Bonjour. I am very happy to be part of this important conversation here at Arctic Frontiers. Hoviasupunga ulumi tatsumunga katingani yumut ilaw hatawama. We are at a pivotal moment for the Arctic. More than ever, we need to remind the world how essential cooperation is and how crucial it is to make space for the voices and perspectives of people from the Arctic, especially Indigenous women. Indigenous women contribute in so many ways through education, community leadership, environmental stewardship, science, and in peace and security. In Canada's Arctic, for example, Inuit women play a pivotal role in strengthening our defense systems. As part of the Canadian Rangers, they help guide our military and security efforts in the Arctic. They help build trust between communities across our vast region. As mothers, artists, knowledge keepers, and elders, Indigenous women hold communities together. They carry languages and cultures forward for future generations. And as leaders in politics, diplomacy, and public service, they know what their communities are living through. They bring real issues to the forefront, which leads to better decisions and real progress within our communities and regions. La femme autochtone font bouger les choses. Indigenous women are driving meaningful change. That's why we need to keep supporting their leadership with strong educational opportunities and meaningful mentoring. Leadership is rooted in confidence. For me, what helped the most was realizing that my culture and my experience as an Inuk woman made me a strong leader, that my perspective was worth listening to. Ilokosira taman natok simatsugu aknaw sunga sibulaktiuni anik sungu yutit sisimayong. My grandmother was one of my greatest mentors. She didn't speak English and didn't have access to telecommunications, but she was confident that Inuit traditional knowledge was as sound and as rich as any other. She passed on her pride in our culture and language. And that gave me the courage to advocate for Inuit rights and to have the hard conversations on issues that divide us. Notre culture est une force qui nourrit notre leadership. I want to encourage Indigenous women to bring their culture into their work and draw strength from it. We must keep pushing to break down the barriers we still face. Barriers like discrimination, violence, and harassment, including that found on the internet on social media. I've experienced it myself. Around the world, this kind of violence pushes too many women out of leadership or stops them from stepping forward in the first place. And when that happens, we all lose. Looking around this room, I'm inspired by the incredible Indigenous women who are here today. Remember that you have a vital role to play. Your leadership is essential to building stronger communities and a more peaceful world. Hauji mahuji junga agnanik, tamar nasivulak tiunisi, adu te harlarimat, suungunik samik sivunik hatsiarumadluta. So I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts, especially from the young leaders with us today. Hoyan namik, nakomik, merci, thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Votre Excellence. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for those thoughtful and inspiring remarks from the heart. We are deeply grateful to you for setting the tone for this important discussion. I am now so pleased to introduce our moderator, Taylor Jobin. Taylor is a Cree and Métis youth leader from Treaty 8 territory, currently based in Dawson City on the traditional territory of the Trondeck-Witchin First Nation. Taylor represents Canada on the Arctic Council Chairship Youth Committee and is completing her studies in Indigenous governance at Yukon University, while also leading community-based research on food sovereignty and wellness in the North. Taylor, we're so delighted to have you with us. Please take it away.
Hi, and good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. And thank you to Her Excellency, the Governor General, for grounding us so meaningfully in the purpose of today's gathering. I want to take a moment to acknowledge not only the three extraordinary women on stage with me, leaders whose work spans the circumpolar Arctic, but also the land that we're fortunate to be connecting on Sapmi territory. As a young person and as someone who believes deeply in advocacy and systems change, it's powerful to be in a space that celebrates Indigenous women across the North, not only for their leadership, but for the knowledge and systems and futures that they sustain. Their work reminds us that transformation does not happen in isolation, but in relationships between each other. So to introduce the panelists, we have Silja Karina Mutka. She is the president of the Sami Parliament of Norway and a long-standing advocate for Sami rights. She's active in Sami politics since the 1990s, longer than I've been alive, and she has held leadership positions in both the Sami Parliament and Sami civil society. And she's known for her strong voice on inclusive governance grounded in Sami knowledge and rights. And then we have Sarah Osvig. She is the chair of the Inuit Circumpolar Council and a longtime defender of Indigenous and human rights. She has served in both the Greenlandic and Danish parliaments as Greenland's vice premier and in numerous international roles, including as a member of a UN Secretary General's panel. She holds a PhD in Arctic Studies from the University of Greenland. And then we have Virginia Mearns. She's Canada's Arctic ambassador and senior Arctic official to the Arctic Council. She previously held senior roles in the government of Nunavut and with Inuit organizations, including as COO of Nunavut Tongavik Inc. Her career has focused on advancing Inuit rights and strengthening access to services across Nunavut, and she is a recipient of the King Charles III Coronation Medal. So thank you all so much for being here and having this important conversation with us. So before we dive into institutions and policy, I'd really like to begin where, as we know, Indigenous leadership really begins, in our communities with place and family. So could you share a teaching moment or a responsibility from your community or upbringing that still guides how you lead today? If you want to start, Sarah.
Well, thank you. For me, the leadership, it starts with responsibility rather than positions. Mm-hmm. In Sami communities, leadership is learned early through care of land, language, and people, and through understanding that decisions have consequences beyond the moment. That grounding stays with me in institutional settings. It shapes how I think about time, accountability, and the responsibility leaders carry toward future generations. And I do think I must quote Her Excellency. I also learned a lot about leadership from my akko, my grandmother. She was a nurse. And I do remember situations where our home became a hospital. And what inspired me was her way of carrying out her work without letting other things interfere when she had something to deal with.
Connection to community is so important. I think what grounds all of us. I don't know if anyone else wants to go.
Yes, I think, and first of all, Qoyanak Guido for welcoming us in Sápmi, and Qoyanak to Her Excellency for the amazing introductory remarks. It is an honor for me to be in this panel. I think that what's stood out for me, especially after entering into politics years ago, was some of the requirements and teachings from my parents, who, for example, as a cross-country skier, I was never allowed to skip practice, no matter the weather. And so when you go cross-country skiing, and this was when I lived in Sisimiut, a wonderful place in the west coast of Kalaallit Nunaat, you can go very far inland, and you have to remember that you also have to come back again. And since I was never allowed to skip practice, I would be out in any kind of weather. And so that really is something I've carried with me, to be able to understand both how the weather is possibly changing while you're on the track, how you need to also make sure that you have the perseverance to come back home, and also be able to continue the work that you're doing. And that's really something that's that has been guiding my work as a politician, but also in general. But it is, as Silja is saying, also the connection to our land, to the living beings, our community members, our family, and so forth. And I really also took note of the important message from Her Excellency's speech about the pivotal moment we are in. And we are indeed feeling that in Kalaallit Nunaat, Greenland. And I think that perseverance that we have as Indigenous peoples is something that will be important in these years. And we need to continue standing together and put emphasis everywhere we go on upholding our rights.
Yeah. I'd like to also express my thanks to Her Excellency for remarkable opening words, and to my fellow panelists. It's such an honor to be here this morning. I think for me, reflecting back just in terms of the way I was raised, not only with my parents, but my extended family. As children, we want to be involved and have our own opinions, but I was taught to listen, and the skill of observation and paying attention to what is happening around me, and the conversations that are taking place, really trying to understand why those conversations are happening. And in that, you start to discern the roles in which everybody plays. Not everybody is in the forefront, but we recognize in our communities there are many behind us that support us, that give their individual perspectives, that really help to form the direction that you pursue. And so I think one of the biggest elements that I've tried to take along in my career has been to listen, and also to observe the environment that I'm in. I think it's really quite critical to pay attention as much as possible, quite consistently.
Yeah, no, and I think from what I'm hearing from you guys, that these teachings in which you were raised with, they don't stay at home with you. This isn't something that, it's what guides you and travels with you into spaces where decisions are made and where you are today. And Indigenous women are often described as having a seat at the table, but each of you are currently reshaping the table itself. And from where you stand, where are Indigenous women most reshaping how Arctic governance works, and what changes when they lead and not just advise institutions? Mm-hmm. Do you want to start?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think it still is very much at home, whether it's at home within their own families or in their home communities. We continue to see women taking leadership roles. They can be community-based organizations, within school settings, within municipalities. We are seeing more and more women being supported to take these roles as well. And so I think the fact that we continue to take more space, and it enables us to bring our perspectives to those tables. with the changing times as well. For those of us that are fortunate enough to be rooted in culture, the culture of our home, we are enabled and allowed that space to bring that with us into contemporary situations and debates that may be taking place. And so that ultimately enables us to also, in leadership roles, really shape the outcomes as a result.
Yes, we recently held the first Inuit Women's Summit in the Inuit Circumpolar Council with delegates from our homelands across Galashiq Nunat, Canada, Alaska, and our fellow Inuit from Chukotka online. And one thing that really struck me was when we were writing up on papers on the wall, a few things, how we felt about being in the room, and one delegate wrote, "In every chair, a leader." And that was really also the feeling we had in the room. We were gathering practitioners, especially within healing and health and education, addressing first and foremost the current situation for many Inuit communities where obstetric violence has been a reality and continues to affect us not just individually but as collective communities. And it was just so amazing to see how the knowledge from so many different areas was gathered in one room, and how truly that there was a leader in every single chair of every delegate who was there from each of the communities that were represented. So I very much echo what Ambassador Mearns is saying, and I think that also is reflected in many ways in the way we see that Indigenous women are taking leadership also on the international arena. And I do want to recognize the amazing work that we are seeing done by the Foreign Minister of Galashiq Nunat, Naalakkersuisoq Vivian Motzfeldt, these days. I was very moved to see the pictures and hear her speak our Indigenous language from Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago, but also knowing the significance of an Indigenous woman, a minister representing a people in the Arctic, going to Washington, D.C. and delivering the clear messages from the collective Galashiq Nunat and our people. So I think we're seeing so many women who are taking that leadership, taking that strength from our communities, and doing work that is so seldomly recognized. But we should be much more, we should recognize that much more than we do. For example, I was amazed also, or not in a positive way, to see the statistics of who is, for example, given the medals of honor by the Parliament of Galashiq Nunat, and how few women are still on that list. So I think that there's a discrepancy in how we view the work of women often, and that is something that we really have a collective responsibility to reflect on.
Yes, I am a bit sick, so excuse for that. But I do think that Indigenous women are not only taking seats at the table. We have an important message, and often I tend to think that we are also important voices in trying to convey how the earth and the nature and the land and the waters are connected with humans, and that we are not alone. And it seems so obvious, but I find often that decision-making processes and the table, it's shaped in a way that doesn't allow this premise to be respected enough. And I do think that when Indigenous women lead, governance becomes more inclusive, more long-term, and more grounded in the lived realities. Because we do not incorporate the Indigenous knowledge only as a layer, a cultural layer, but it is integrated in how decisions are made. And I think this goes particularly, of course, and it becomes visible in the areas like climate adaptation and cooperation, which is essential, I do think, for for all human beings, but especially indigenous peoples, and of course sustainability. We are taught in the Sami that we should think 7 generations ahead, and we should also try to incorporate wisdom from 7 generations. And I do think it applies also not only to the wisdom, but also the things that have happened that hasn't been good. Those teachings should also be incorporated. And I find that in the swift and often very driven decision-making we have today, there are seldom place and respect towards that kind of thinking. And I do think we have an important role to play. Yeah. Because that, of course, also changes the pace and the priorities of governance, because we then shift from short-time decision-making to the more, longer time resilience, if I could say so.
Yeah. You guys are saying such important and impactful things, and as an Indigenous youth hearing this, like I think to my home community and where I see Indigenous women in leadership, and they are changing the way decisions are made, and they are more connected community and relationships and the land, and that changes the table itself and how decisions are being made, and it's so awesome to see. And when we are listening to these success stories, we celebrate the progress that's being made, but also, as Her Excellency noted, Indigenous women continue to face challenges which include harassment and backlash. So what are some of the most persistent barriers Indigenous women face in leadership today, and what is helping shift these conditions? Do you want to start?
Yes, I can. I do think Her Excellency makes a vital point. I myself have also experienced a lot of situations where hate speech and on other things have affected me, I think, more than other leaders. And I do find it very heartbreaking when I see young people that take steps back because they do not want to experience that in public society. But anything, I do think that one of the most persistent barriers Indigenous women face is not access, but the authority, actually. We are often included for perspective, while decision-making power remains elsewhere. And I do encourage everybody to pay attention to that. What kind of situation is this? And are you actually taking part in the decision-making process? Because when the Indigenous women move from advising to leading, resistance can become personal rather than political. And that is my own experience. So what can shift these conditions? That is a very important question. So I just put it out here. And I do think it's structure. Clear mandates, shared responsibility, and institutions willing to act on Indigenous leadership. That is important, because every institution can act upon Indigenous leadership. They do not have to wait for central government to make them take this step or this transition. That can any institution do. And I do think that I think our voice, when we calmly point towards the problems we have, we deserve also to be respected, and that these teachings should be taken into the decision-making process.
Yeah, structural change is really important, so we can actually have a space where Indigenous voices and ways of knowing aren't just advisorial, but they actually get to make those decisions. And I don't know if either of you would like to add on.
Yes, I think when reflecting on my own time and my own sort of entering into politics some years back, I was a single mother, and I held office in the Parliament of Denmark, which is 4,000 kilometers away from home. And I immediately realized that as a woman and as a mother, there was just so many structural obstacles that I would just need to jump over. And I think that really also demonstrates that you have to, as a woman, have a certain kind of perseverance and also willpower to do the things that we do often. Again, to me, it really also is reflected in the level of recognition of the work that women are doing in every area of the society and communities. This is not only for women that are politicians. This is also for the nurse, for the teacher, for the grandmother who has gone through a long life. My own grandmother, for example, from Qasigiangwit, she was both a person with a disability and she also had a child who is my father, who is legally fatherless. So there was also the structural things in a colonized nation as Galashiq Nunaat at the time, where there was legislation that was putting women at an extra marginalized position and extra at risk. And I think we are only now just starting to learn what the consequences to the whole society of those policies are. I'm thinking both about the IUD campaign or the IUD program of the legally fatherless legislation and so forth. Many of those policies that came with colonization, they did have adverse effects specifically on women, and they were specifically targeted towards women. And so I think especially for us in Galashiq Nunaat, these are things that are now surfacing, and we are starting to also understand how that has really trickled out into society in terms of how we view women in our societies. And I am really, saddened in my heart when I think about that sometimes, because it also explains to me how we have sometimes felt that we are looking into sad eyes when we are looking into our grandparents' or parents' eyes. Mm-hmm. The good thing is that we now talk about it, and it's now surfacing, and we need to do what we can for that kind of wrongdoings not to be repeated, and also not to be used against us in for example, as we see now, a great power political rivalry. And that's really something that in the past months has been very clear and stood out clearly in Galashiq Nunaat, that some of the things we carry with us, they are in some way almost sacred things we are carrying that have brought hurt and trauma. And we need to be careful about how that is being used, sometimes against us, but also how we then work with it internally and create that space to work with that. And I think that is needed for us to fully understand why we still see such huge inequities gender-wise in our society. But with that said, I also want to make clear that these things are being addressed, and they are being addressed with a recognition, for example, in the Kingdom of Denmark, by the governments, both in Denmark and Galashiq Nunaat. So these things are things that are needing a long process, and we've been looking very much to Canada to how that has been, truth and reconciliation processes have gone. But we also need to figure out how to go through such processes in a way that truly reflects our needs, specifically in our context.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know, like you were saying, we're dealing now with things that happened a long time ago, and colonial governments and colonial structures and policies, they were meant to have long-term effects. And they were meant to keep Indigenous systems and ways of knowing out of the new government and the new styles. And now we're at a place where we can change those, and putting Indigenous women in leadership positions where we make change is a good way to start, for sure. If you'd like to say something, Virginia?
Yeah. I think back to when I was starting my career, and it was a moment in which I was fortunate to witness women become even more outspoken, with a strength and confidence that maybe wasn't observed in the same way. And I think about the barriers that I've observed that my peers have experienced, or women that have held space before me, and one of the biggest ones that I think we've been impacted by and continue to be impacted by to varying degrees is silence. Silence when there are wrongs being carried out against women specifically, either fear-based. There tends to be a perception that when a woman has the audacity or tenacity to pursue a leadership role, it is to take something away. Whereas when we enter these spaces, we want to contribute. It's not as though we want to take leadership for the sake of the title. It is, we see these opportunities as an opportunity to contribute, as an opportunity to expand the way in which we tackle issues, but also I think a much more holistic way in which we approach our engagement and our collaboration with our communities and elsewhere. So the impact that silence has had has unfortunately been so great in the past, and it's something that we need to continue to battle with each other, for each other, not just for women, but also for the children that we're raising, for the grandchildren that will come, so that they can see each other also as equals, and they won't have to start with this contemplation of why her and why not only me. There is still that in a lot of spaces, unfortunately, and sometimes the other unfortunate circumstances, there are times in which women are pitted against each other. And this is not productive. This is damaging, and we need to find ways in which we can continue to break down those types of barriers to ensure that our Indigenous women feel safe when they pursue really challenging roles. It is not easy to decide to pursue a leadership role. It is not easy to hold onto that role, and also even to step away from it. That is not an easy decision to make, and to give space for someone to take over. And so I think we need to keep thinking about what we choose to stay silent on, the reasons why, and what we're willing to speak to, what we're willing to address, what we're willing to challenge is going to be a part of our lives going forward.
Yeah. And it makes me think a lot about communities coming together and uplifting each other, and that's easier when you're at home and you have your home community, and to see that more reflected in these institutions that you guys work within. I would like to see that as I hopefully grow more into these positions. And something I'm really hearing from a lot of you is about, I liked how you said the 7 generations. That's something we talk a lot about at home, is when you make a decision, you think about the next 7 generations, not just what are you going to get immediately. And I think that's a very vital Indigenous tradition, is it's never just about one generation. It's about continuity, and it's about paving the way for future leaders. And as a young Indigenous woman finding my way into Arctic policy spaces, and what I experience and I see a lot of is inclusion, a lot of checkboxing and a lot less power sharing. And I'm just wondering, what has meaningful intergenerational leadership looked like for you guys? And I don't know if anyone wants to start.
I can start.
Yeah.
I was mentioning my akko, my grandmother. I do have a strong legacy in my family for women in leadership locally, and so that I'm very grateful of. And I'm very grateful also for the political leaders and organizational leaders we have had. They have been strong female leaders, but they have been very, very conscious on giving room and space for my career. And now I'm trying the same. I have we have excellent younger women who are in formal leadership roles. some of them even with higher formal rank than my own. I'm very proud of them, and I'm very confident that they will do any job that I do even better. But at the same time, I do think, and I want to stress, that young youth and young leadership must be independent. We have a youth movement, Anna said it, Norat. It is a political force in its own right. They have changed the society we live in our context, bringing up one of the most public incidents, where the Fosen case and the human rights breach from the Norwegian government was addressed and protested against. So they are defending both human rights and also our own constitution and state in their own way. And I do think that is important. They do not ask for my allowance, and why would they? They shouldn't ask for allowance, because what my role in my current position is, it is that I have to make sure our institutions are strong enough to engage with independent youth leadership. And our role is not to manage it, but we have to support it without control. And I do think that is essential for continuity. And I'm pretty sure we will see you in some role that will be very remarkable.
Thank you. I hope so. And yeah, I think that's really important, that it's an independent thing. It's not just a subsection of an institution already. Sarah, would you like to add on?
Yes, I think adding to what President Mordka already said, it's also to be deliberate in our leadership, in our way of gathering people. Again, our Inuit Women's Summit, we were very adamant that we needed to have both elders and youth and everyone in between at the summit. It was important to give that seat and that space to all generations, to share knowledge and also listen to each other. And I think that too often we might forget that as those who are, you know, in leadership roles, to be deliberate in creating that space for intergenerational learning. For myself, also again, my daughter travels very far away to take her education. That's really difficult as a mother, as an Anana, that our children, because we live in the Arctic, and we have only so many institutions to go and study at. Many times our youth have to leave quite early. And so it's really a thing for me to consider, how do I make sure she goes reindeer hunting? How do I make sure she also have the good seal soup? You know, and those things that are really part of our identity and our upbringing is so difficult to pass on, especially for us who live so remotely. So we also have a structural challenge in terms of maintaining our coherence as Arctic communities, because at the same time, of course, we want our youth to have the opportunities to do whatever they want with their lives. But there's also a gap in between us, created by the space, of course, the distance. And that's something that I really struggle with myself to figure out as an Anana, a mother.
Yeah, I think of the very deliberate decision I made to raise my children in one community. I spent my childhood moving all over, and that created a disconnect from my mother's family in Igloolik, and it was a personal challenge and a difficult pathway to feel comfortable again in who I am. And I was very fortunate that I've had very strong family members that help ground me. And so understanding where my family had come from to enable me to explain to my children where they also come from, and how that past has formed their current day is really important for me. It's something that I feel very strongly in, but also recognize not everyone has that that privilege. It's a privilege now to be strongly rooted in your culture. It is a situation where more and more of our young people don't have that as just their normal upbringing. We have a lot of external influences that impact the way in which our children are growing up, but also the impacts of trauma that you spoke to. And it has come in many, many ways, and that has really broken the way in which we approach our families and the way in which we rear children, because of that actual severing of ties to our homes and our culture, and that generational knowledge being passed on. We're rebuilding that and replanting our roots in that, and that takes time. And so I think about a lot of informal settings, meaning outside of work, where I've really benefited from being surrounded by multiple generations, women that are organizing a family celebration and making sure we have all of the components of the meals that we're going to have, that the garbage is being taken out, that the children aren't running around too crazily. And in those very informal settings, the stories that are being told, the stories that I've been told, the experiences that have been shared when someone has brought into the world a new baby. And I think as women, we exchange our own personal experiences in that, but then also the lived realities that women have faced and continue to face is something, again, that we need to continue to speak about. I think a lot of times we feel as though we find ourselves feeling alone when we're actually not. When we start talking about situations that we've experienced, we come to learn that women have had either similar experiences or have a level of empathy that enables you to keep moving forward. And so this is something that I feel very strongly that, like you were saying, the bringing together and creating that space is so critical to normalize that type of conversation again, so that we don't continue to live with a stigmatized worldview. And it's really been so exciting to, like you said, to watch our youth really do well in holding space and really do well in articulating what they're facing, in articulating the desires that they have, in articulating that the future that they want, not just for themselves, but for their communities as well. Thank you.
It's so amazing hearing you guys talk about all this and thinking about at home when I see at home. And we have within the self-governing First Nations, we have the youth council that are separate, and it's amazing for you to note that is important for it to be a separate entity where people are making those decisions as youth community for their community themselves. And I know I left for school and that was hard, and going back home it has been so amazing for my education and connecting back to community and connecting with elders and other youth really uplift me personally as a youth, and I think most youth in the room can agree as well. Having that sense of community with your elders and others in your community is really where I think youth power and comes from. And so to close, I'd love to hear from each of you, what advice would you give to a young Indigenous woman who wants to make a difference, who wants to lead, build, and help transform the Arctic?
Never back down.
Yeah.
Just continue.
Yeah.
No matter the role. There's so many different roles that we can all take, and every single one of them is important. Mm-hmm. If it's to listen quietly in the back, or if it's to be the one who speaks out. The most important thing, I think, is to remember that perseverance we carry with us as Indigenous peoples, and also the knowledge we carry with us we have very specialized skills on how to survive and thrive in the Arctic, and that's sometimes forgotten, especially in the narrative that is created about us currently, for example, in the mass and mainstream media internationally. So never forget that, and never back down.
Yes, I do think it's important that you learn about how the system works, but it's important that the systems don't define you. Stay rooted. I think that is something that is important. It brings you security and a platform where you are drawing your strength and your understanding of yourself. And I do think it's not an identity performance, but it's more like that you are a knowledge holder, and that you have solid knowledge that you actually need to convey to the world. And then it's important to build alliances within your own generation. I do think also this is a intergenerational thing. It's important to let both those who are younger and those who are older support you, and remember that leadership is not, it's a collective thing, actually. So that is the advice I would bring.
I think something that I would continue to encourage is to remember that you don't need to know everything all at once, especially if you are fortunate enough to hold leadership space at a young age. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to not know, and recognize that learning is a lifelong experience, and you learn in different ways from different people. And so the more open you are to listening and to reaching out really will help in your grounding and in the pathway that you want to pursue. And also sometimes pathways take little detours, and don't get discouraged by those detours. They may be professional detours, they may be personal ones, but to your point of perseverance, you just keep going. And so I think it is really important to be comfortable in asking questions, to be comfortable in saying, this is something brand new to me, I don't understand, can you help? That's something that I think we need to do more consistently, even as seasoned leaders. We encounter situations where we're being brought together with situations or a new environment that you've never been a part of, and so being open to learning is always going to be helpful.
I know I've learned so much from hearing all of you guys speak, and it's just so amazing to hear about how important connections, I think, is the biggest thing I've taken away from this, is how important connections to the community, the land, and especially each other are, and how far that goes in building leadership and especially building youth up. I think to have a youth community is so important, and to like you said, not feel alone and continue that learning process for as long as you can, and don't pretend like you know everything. Sometimes I know as a youth it is hard to ask for help. You want to be able to do everything and you want to prove yourself, but it feels good to know that there is people you can go to and people who support you, and that you come from a good community. And I don't know if anyone has any final thoughts, but if not, I could
just say that the paradox is the more responsibility you take on, the more help you actually need.
Yep.
So
that's true.
So that's something I would like to point out.
Yes, and I think also, as we have been gathering here in Romsa, Tromsø, it's been so important to meet with other indigenous peoples, and I think we are especially reminded as Inuit how important it is that we continue standing shoulder by shoulder, supporting each other in this time of change. We have seen the change coming, living in the Arctic for many years, but we've also been through difficult times before, and we have been able to maintain and nourish those ties across state borders that we represent as Arctic indigenous peoples very often. And I think that, again, Her Excellency's speech spoke to that in a very important way, that we have a certain task as Arctic leaders, no matter what kind of leadership we are in, to consider very carefully how we continue cooperation in the Arctic, and also how we ensure that those principles and those things that have been built over the past many decades, that they are not lost in this time of rupture. And for that to be not lost, we really need to stand together. And that's something that we are very warmed by the heart as Inuit, to receive so many positive statements of solidarity from all over the world. So qoyanak for that.
I echo the sentiments that have already been shared. It is these types of venues where being enabled to have this type of dialogue is incredibly special. And we want to continue to be mindful of the spaces that we create, not only for our children and our elders, but also fellow Indigenous peoples, especially if we're hosting, and creating the space to have a safe conversation about our realities, about our hopes and desires, and to be able to be the deciding factor on the outcomes for our communities is going to remain such a critical component that we need to keep pushing for. We can't let up at any point. This is something that we will continue to have to work very hard for, and we'll need to work together. So, thank you.
I think as a youth being here, listening to you guys and being at this conference, I think, and hearing the conversations we're having about where the Arctic is now and where we need to go to move forward, I think my biggest reflection I've heard from other youth here as well is to reflect on where Indigenous peoples have come from and their traditions. A lot of it is based on community and connection and taking care of the land and each other, and I think we could learn a lot from Indigenous ways of being and knowing that could really help us inform how to have a healthy Arctic future where we're more connected and taking care of each other. And I'm so thankful for you guys and the lessons I've learned, and to be able to be here in front of everyone and in front of you guys. And yeah, I just thank you so much for everything that you do in your communities and your institutions and for each other. I just thank you. Perfect. Yeah, we can all gather and meet each other now, and there's like another 30 minutes.